Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 719 of Longbox Heroes, the Lamborghini of comic book podcasts. Joe and Todd here. Todd, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. Cool in my air conditioning, ready to do a podcast about comics.
Awesome. That's the way that we like it. I still have not figured out the logistics of being able to record the podcast outside from the pool. Not that it would help, because I think the pool temperature and the outside temperature are the same. Right. So it's just like, do you want to be hot or do you want to be hot and wet?
Well, hot and it's submerged in water is different from being hot and sweaty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's sweaty with an SH. So, But I haven't swam in forever. I need to do a good swim.
Come on down. I'll take the cover off the pool. Let's hop in.
Yep. And we could book the next couple months of Patreon and the main show and stuff like that. Yeah. It'll be great.
Nobody will get pushed in, I promise.
Oh, good. I'll keep my phone out of my pocket just in case.
Just in case.
Right, the logistics of it and all.
So we do have a bunch of news to talk about this week. Lots of moving and shaking in regards to the who's and the whys have your books and what redundancies that may or may not cause. DC is really trying hard to get retailers to get you to buy Absolute Power stuff. More rumor and innuendo in regards to who's going to be doing what with the big DC Absolute rollout that's coming out later this year. And the passing of a bona fide, dyed-in-the-wool comic book legend. Mm-hmm. We also, of course, have Becky's walk down Lois Lane, where she introduces us to someone I think who is in line for maybe a comeback in the world of comics.
I would hope so.
Yes. Conventions going on this weekend with a little bit of a detour there. We have what we read from this past week, which would be Action Comics 1067, From the World of Minor Threats, Barfly #1, and the return, when it sees fit, of the preview review, as we will be discussing the upcoming Mad Cave Jeremy Adams Flash Gordon book that comes out in 2 weeks as well. Mm-hmm. What we're looking forward to coming out this week, continuation of Todd and Joe Have Issues, as we are rereading all of Gail Simone's Secret Six, and reviews, discussions, what have you, of the penultimate episodes of both Star Wars The Acolyte and the latest season of The Boys.
I will say this about The Boys here. It was a tough episode for me to watch, Joe.
Oh, yeah?
It was a tough episode, and I may have a big theory at the end of when we get there. So it's me and my brain booking the end of The Boys. So.
Oh, yes. Again, we're booking the territory and the podcast. We're not speculating on what's going to happen on an episode of a TV show that was taped 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what this show is for. Mindless speculation.
Right.
So we have some change-ups, some flip-arounds, some what-do-you-dos in regards to the distribution of comics. Currently we have Diamond, we've got Lunar, we've got Penguin Publishing, who are all getting your comics to you. Penguin Random House, that is. And it was just announced this week that Distillery, who is a burgeoning up-and-coming comic book publisher. I know we had discussed one of their books recently on the show. It was the new Brian Azzarello book, correct?
Blood Brother's Mother.
Yes. So they just this week flipped from Lunar to go exclusively with Diamond, right? Mm-hmm. And again, not that big of a deal. It's just depending as you as a distributor or you as a comic store owner. That does not change things for us, the readers, technically. But sometimes, and this does happen more times than I care to admit, where a book will be distributed by all three, where it'll be picked up by Diamond, by Lunar, and by Penguin Random House. And depending on where your retailer gets the book from, sometimes could depend if you get the book on time, a week late, or 2 weeks late.
Yep. Leads to mass confusion occasionally, Joe.
Yes, it does. And someone who keeps these sort of spreadsheets and everything else like that, I know I will eventually get my books as it is, but I always like to cross-reference with the actual publisher's website, and I go with the date that's on the publisher's website, even if I can get the book from the publisher the date that they have advertised on their website if my retailer ordered this particular book through Lunar, but for whatever reason my retailer orders that book through Diamond, who is a verified retailer of this book, but for whatever reason the agreement that the publisher has is we give it to Lunar a week ahead of you and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It stinks, but it's interesting to see that there's some moving and shaking going on with this sort of stuff after here we are now. We're coming up on 4 years of the big, or this month is 4 years of the big split.
Right. Because it was during the pandemic, right?
Yes, it was. And so again, we could benchmark it because it was July of the pandemic where the change happened, because here we are, July of 2024 is where DC and Lunar stuff finally has all gone back to sell dates on Wednesdays, where part of their changeover was you could sell our stuff on Tuesdays.
Right.
So they've walked back. We'll see if any other stuff gets walked back as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of which, and again, it's one thing to go from one distributor to another. It's another when a distributor buys a publisher outright.
Mm-hmm.
So Boom just recently announced that they are leaving Diamond and going directly to Penguin Random House, but that's because Penguin Random House purchased Boom.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a big deal that one of the distribution houses purchased a comic book publisher outright and folded them into their own publishing arm.
Yeah, it is. I can't figure out why or how it's going to be big, but I know that's like a stupid thing to say, but they have it now. Like I can't wrap my head around like what you can do with that and why it would be good for you, but I think it's going to start trends, if that makes any sense.
Yes, that's a very good point. Trends. That this is probably not going to be the first one that we see this happen with, and it won't be the last one.
And I'll tell you, Joe, like now, because we have Penguin, Random House, and we have all the like Diamond and distributors, I can't keep up anymore. I don't know, like you told me this, and this is going to go out of my head in a day. Like what people have what. I honestly can't keep up anymore. I think I need a distributing scorecard. Get your scorecard here, get your scorecard here. They're just a bunch of tall guys running around if you don't have a scorecard. I need something to help me out.
So, and again, this is going to be as clear as mud, but I'm going to do my best to be as clear as possible regarding this. Okay. Mm-hmm. Marvel and DC are your two big ones to look at. Okay. Marvel, you can get through Penguin Random House, or you can get through Diamond. You can't get Marvel through Lunar. DC, you can get through Lunar and Diamond, but you can't get it through Penguin Random House, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, it does break down eventually that there are certain publishers that we just talked about moments before, like, okay, if you get it through Lunar, you get it a week early. If you get this, you get that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's right now, and this is where the big change is going to happen, is with Boom going to just Penguin Random House, it will be interesting to see if Penguin Random House does Boom stuff through Lunar as well. And that's where our big change is going to come through. Because right now with the three publishers, and again, Penguin Random House, Lunar, and Diamond, each publisher does two of the three. No one does all three.
Wonder if somebody... Right.
Possibly could be the first one that does just Penguin Random House.
Okay.
And that's where the game changer happens. That's where the trend starts. That's where the first domino falls, and we see those big changes. Or it could just be nothing.
Mm-hmm. And I get confused too, because there was a while there. Wasn't there like a time when Image said they weren't going to be in the Diamond previews anymore?
Yes.
And that lasted all of like a hot month. And then they came back, which I always felt like they thought they were losing sales because they were like, go to our website. And it's stuff like that. Like if you come out of the previews for a month, it would throw me off thinking that I kind of knew Image would never leave Diamond because they want all their options. But I was kind of like, now you people are trying to do your own catalogs and not like, yes, here's our catalogs, but they're not in these other distributors' catalogs, but ordered through those. I'm like you said, it's as clear as mud sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm glad, like, me and you, like, talk and do stuff that I could stay ahead of the curve on some of these books and be like, all right, I know what I'm getting, I know what I'm doing. But man, oh man, for an old comic book fan, these distributors are starting to make it hard on me.
So, and I do this only because I'm fascinated by the moves, and two, because this is, I guess, the new sales number itch that's being scratched on my end, in that me getting a chance to talk about this is maybe helping a listener who wonders why Image isn't in the Diamond catalog that they get, and why, if their store does the thing where you get those catalogs at the beginning of the month, or the end of the 1 month or the beginning of the next month, where there's one separate book for Marvel, which there's been one separate book for Marvel now for almost 30 years. Right. There's a separate book for DC. There's a separate book for Image, and then everything else is in Diamond, or in the big previews catalog. But then in the big previews catalog, there is a checklist for the Marvel stuff. Sometimes there's a checklist for the Image stuff, and there's never a checklist for the DC stuff.
Right.
So if you're only getting one of those things, you might be missing something. And hopefully this is an explanation as to why you might be missing some of that stuff, and why some of that stuff might just be in different places in the future, making me wonder if and when Penguin Random House now is going to have their own separate, say, Boom catalog. Right. Or their own separate thing if and when they start decide, like, okay, every publisher does 2 out of the 3 distribution houses. Boom gets pulled into Penguin Random House. That has to have its own separate catalog. How can I order that stuff?
Mm-hmm. I'll say this. Image is now back in the previews.
Right.
But it has a weird, smaller, like they don't give it, like, the bells and whistles like they do some of the big other companies. Do you know IDW has its own catalog outside of the previews? The books are still in the previews, but there's not a lot of, it's like they get the little solicitations and no big ads and no, like, here's the multiple covers. It'll just give you, like, oh, cover A is this artist, cover B is this artist, whatever. And then they have their own separate catalog that I just happened to get last month because young Josh gave it to me, and I was like, oh, I like this because it shows me more than what's in. I mean, I only ordered from IDW now the new Turtle book by Jason Aaron, but I like that visual of, like, oh, well, here's a full page ad with the various variant covers and, like, a couple of pages from it. It's not just, here, we're going to give you the least amount of real estate space because you were doing whatever, and now you have your own catalog. It's crazy.
Yeah, I did not know IDW had their own separate catalog now here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway,
speaking of folks trying to push some stuff, DC is really working hard to get retailers to get more copies of Absolute Power into the stores. I'm not going to go through the whole chart of where, like, okay, if you buy the same number as this issue of that book, or this issue of that book, and this issue of that book, we're going to give you those discounts. But essentially what they've done is, if you want to order additional copies of any of the Absolute Power books, it's 25 copies for $25. As long as you, like, if you keep those standard orders, which we're not going to go through the whole thing, but if you want to go above that number, each increment of $25 and up, 25 copies and up is only $1, and that's a $5 cover price book, right?
Right. Yep.
So their idea, of course, is to hopefully retailers will take them up on the offer because they feel so strongly about the book and the event and the everything else, is that retailers will take advantage, buy that book for $1, maybe not sell it for $5, maybe sell it for $3 and still make a couple bucks back on it. And again, I'm not a retailer, I'm not a whatever,
Right.
But they're working hard to push that book, and I cannot fault them at all for any of that,
No, as long as they're not taking a loss, that's all that matters.
Right. So, we enjoyed the first issue. I'm not getting all the tie-in stuff.
I was talking with DJ the other day, like a few weeks ago. He was in the shop, and he's like, "Oh, I got the Task Force 7 or whatever it is." And I was like, "No, if it's not got Mark Waid's name on it, and it's not a tie-in in a regular ongoing book that I already get, I'm not getting it."
Right. I'm the same way. I'm getting the main book written by Mark Waid. I'm picking up the books that I'm already getting, which is Batman, Superman, Green Arrow. And so far, they've been doing a good job of filling in the gaps where need be if there's stuff that's going on in those other books. Hopefully that does not come to bite me in the end, where I miss some sort of big, giant plot hole thing. Mm-hmm. Then I got to try to find the book. And again, I'm not a reseller, but what happens is if something big happens in a book, then it gets scooped up, then it makes it much more difficult for me and you and everyone else to find.
Right. You still get Green Lantern, right?
Yes, Green Lantern. I forgot. Yeah, Green Lantern.
Yeah, because you said Green. I was wondering if you dropped it. That's all.
No. It's still in there. Yeah. So speaking of DC and what they have planned coming up here, of course, over the last several weeks, more and more information about the Absolute universe has been leaking out and spilling out, and where people are going to be going. Obviously we've talked before, and again, most of the books do not have artists announced. I know Batman has Nick Dragotta announced as the artist, but again, just to run through everything, Batman is Scott Snyder, Superman is Jason Aaron, Wonder Woman is Kelly Thompson, Jeff Lemire is on Flash, and then the new speculation is that there's going to be an Al Ewing Green Lantern book. Mm-hmm. Now, with all of this being said, a week ahead, as we record this on a Tuesday to come out on a Wednesday, on Wednesday, Scott Snyder and Josh Williamson are doing an online something or other.
Right.
I assume it's going to be a week ahead of San Diego, the official announcement of all the Absolute stuff.
Right. Couldn't they have moved it back one day for our recording?
You mean moved it up a day?
Move it up today, yeah.
Yeah. No, unfortunately not. I get why they're doing it, because Wednesday is the comic book day, which is why we record these things on a Tuesday to roll out on a Wednesday, unless you wanted to go over to doing a live show Wednesday nights on stuff. And then we got to do StreamYard. We got to stream on the YouTube channel. I got to teach you what super chats are. Then we got to get the super tip system involved. Then we got to choose what AI voices we're going to have on the show. I think it's just better we do things the way that we do. We'll take copious notes during that, and we'll talk about it next week.
Right. Wasn't there talk of one point of us recording stuff in the Discord? Is that
there's talk of a lot of things, Todd.
Gotcha. Just there's a lot of talk. Got it.
Yes. If you want, we could go and I can start investigating things. I don't
know.
Yeah.
As long as we'll see. But are you like have any change in feelings? Anything about this like the Absolute line? Any like?
So I'm still gonna try the Scott Snyder Batman one with some trepidation, right? The Jason Aaron Superman one is a gimme. There's no questions asked. That's coming home with me. I don't know if they're doing like a launch book to tease everything. I have a feeling that they probably are going to. We'll find out from the announcement this week. But I might just end up getting all the number ones just to see.
I'm on that shelf kind of too. Like Jason Aaron will get my buy. Will I buy the Flash book just to buy the Flash book? Maybe. But the other ones are like, oh, you got to sell me. You know what I mean? So we'll see when they come out.
We've talked about this before. I'm more of a DC person as you are. You know, my poll list, if we're looking at the big two, is 2-1 DC over Marvel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I like comic books. I like creators. It's going to be interesting. I'm a sucker for like a DC revamp, relaunch, or whatever. Maybe this will be the one that finally takes.
Yep.
But they're doing a good job of getting the hype train going around it.
Right.
Yeah. But in a little bit of sad news here, it came out after we had recorded last week that comic book writer, artist, everything, Michael Zulli has passed away.
Yeah.
Now, only 71 years old. I was unaware that he was a writer as well. I knew him primarily from his art on so many Vertigo things, specifically Sandman and Swamp Thing.
Right.
There is some of the most famous Sandman and Swamp Thing art, whether it be covers, whether it be pinups, whether it be whatever. Those were all Michael Zulli paint jobs, I guess, if you will, right?
Right.
He also, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago here on the show, maybe even like months ago. There's a infamous Swamp Thing story by Rick Veitch, which DC was like, should we publish this? We're doing a collection. Send us an email if you think we should or should not. That had art by Michael Zulli as well. So it'll be interesting to see if that had come out. But yeah, just an amazing visual style that I think once you saw, especially if you grew up reading comics or, you know, whenever it was that you got to the Sandman Swamp Thing stuff in your reading life and you see that stuff, I guarantee if it didn't knock your socks off, I don't know what we're doing here, you know?
Right. I'm a big Zulli fan. Like you said, obviously you go right to the wake for Sandman. He was on Swamp Thing. He, as 30 years ago, exactly, he was doing that Neil Gaiman, Alice Cooper 3-issue mini that came out with the album, which cemented him in my Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? I have a page of that. He did 3 issues, not in a row though. They bumped him around. They might have been out of order at one point, but he did 3 issues of an alternate versions of the Turtles that were kind of like tied into his Puma Blues run, and they were like samurai. And I remember reading the book, and I was like, "This isn't Eastman and Laird," but it looked gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And then on top of that, all of his artwork for a lot of stuff, like the Swamp Thing that he had, ended up becoming a Swamp Thing statue that I ended up owning. They put like Sandman bookends out, that there was a Morpheus and a Daniel based on his stuff. And he had various other like knickknacks, like whatever they would put out with his, and anytime they did, and it was a character I loved, it went right in my collection. I absolutely loved Michael Zulli's artwork, and I'm sad at his passing.
For sure. If you've never seen his art or you don't know who we're talking about, you know, just Google Michael Zulli, Zulli, Swamp Thing, and you're going to see some of the most beautiful and amazing depictions of, you know, essentially a monster character in the DC Vertigo universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are beautiful, Todd specifically wanted me to shoehorn in discussion of, is this your bias toward people named Todd that you wanted to talk about this?
Yeah, this is once again some big Todd energy right here, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Todd McFarlane announced that they will be putting out an exclusive through his online store, a Jonah Hex 2-figure pack, which is Jonah and his horse, the General, which was only around for a little bit until he caught some stray bullets, which makes DJ laugh hysterically. And this, it's gonna. I don't know how much it's going to be. It goes on sale later this week for a pre-order. It's absolutely gorgeous. I didn't think we would be getting any like Jonah Hex merch like from the toys, but from him. But they were doing some interesting things, like getting Ambush Bug and getting some other stuff. But there's a lot of people online saying that the horse mold is the same horse with maybe some differences from Gunslinger Spawn.
Oh, okay.
So you're like, oh, you don't have to make a new mold. You don't have to do this. You could change it, tweak it just a little bit. So that ends up, saving money. And then somebody like the parts where, like that's Captain Boomerang's torso and this is that. And then we add a new head. Obviously, you always have to do a new head with a new hat, which is always a good for an action figure. And we could do Jonah Hex. And I was like, oh, doesn't matter. Shut up. Here's my money. Take it. I really, really want this figure. When DJ dropped it in the Discord today, Joe, you have no idea how giddy I was. How giddy I was to get this figure set. I hope the box looks great. I want one. It's only a matter of once we figure out how much it is how many I'm going to get. And don't say 2 because I know what you're thinking. But yeah. And then on top of that, a listener of the show, Richard on Twitter, also called Confoundo, he sent me a thing that they're doing this crowdfunding DC game, which has figurines and cards. And they backed it. Like they're 400% over backed. But like if they got 800,000, whatever is like money to do it, they keep doing these figures and up the chain you go. And Jonah Hex is one of them. And I was like, oh, he's like, you're going to buy this? I said, I don't know. It's like a $35 card game. Then you have to buy add-ons and sets. And he's like, oh, if I get one, I'll end up sending it to you. Or we could work out a deal. And I was like, oh, that's really cool because I would just buy it separate. And I'm like, they're doing little figures of Jonah Hex. They're doing Todd McFarlane's doing a 2-pack. Joe, it is truly the platinum age of Jonah Hex. It is the platinum age of Jonah Hex.
Oh, I had it teed up ready to go to ask if this was the golden age of Jonah Hex, but alas, it is not. It's the platinum age. Thank you very much.
Because it goes bronze, silver, gold, platinum. Thank you.
I will say this, looking at the figure, it is a very nice looking figure. The very stylistically shot, some nice fig photography there. I like the use of cloth goods on Jonah.
Right.
For the jacket, I say the next step in action figures, dolls, toys, whatever, is not just cloth goods like we have for the cape, or his jacket that he's wearing, rather, but actually denim material for the jeans if a character is wearing jeans.
There you go. And I like, if you look at it, it says McFarlane, like in the McFarlane toys, whether they're on Twitter or on Facebook, they're like McFarlane Collector Edition 2-pack 1 includes 8 accessories and soft goods duster coat. Not a toy, Joe. This is what it says. It's like some sort of collector's edition. So, I'm just saying, I think they mark it as a collector's edition so they can get around the whole like thing that they've been doing with DC not wanting their action figures to have guns. Some do, some don't. And I think by doing a collector's edition, not a toy, it's like he can have 6 guns and rifles and shotguns and we don't care.
I know that this is not a toy thing. It's something that appears in a lot of the non-Hasbro or the non-Mattel, non-Jazzwares, AEW, WWE figures.
Right.
And that's how they could get away with, one, charging a little bit more price for them because they're quote-unquote adult collectibles, but that they can get away with like having, maybe bloody figures or, figures that come with all sorts of assortments of weapons and so forth.
Mm-hmm. How many are you getting?
You know what? I'll say this. I'm not the Jonah Hex guy you are by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a very nice-looking figure. I will give you that. It is not going to be a day one purchase for me.
Mm-hmm.
But, let's talk some holiday sales and maybe we'll talk, right?
Right. I wonder how long, like, the collect, like, I don't know if it'll go fast or go slow, because I'm buying one off the bat, like, not a problem. Like, $70, $50, whatever, like, we're in the ballpark. But I'm definitely getting one, and if they are down the line sale, I could see getting a second one for a Lucy, Joe.
For sure. Because, again, I like the figure. I don't really need the horse.
Yeah, but you can put your other action figures on it. You can put Ambush Bug on it.
Yeah, it's true. So last but not least in the news, we talk about all these different news sources and a way to get information. I always say contact your, look up who your favorite creator is. They have a Substack, a newsletter, something, some sort of email list to sign up for, and make sure that you do that. Well, apparently someone heard me, and not enough people were doing it, because this week at your local comic book store, if you go there, you can get the physical printout edition of Zdarsky Comic News, which is the Chip Zdarsky newsletter. And if you're familiar with Chip Zdarsky, and maybe you're familiar with Chip Zdarsky from his writing on stuff like Daredevil and Batman and things of that nature, maybe you're unfamiliar with his like sense of humor, which is pretty good, pretty fun, pretty out there. Lines up with me a little bit, but maybe goes a little bit a little over the line. Just looking at the cover of this, it's essentially just a thing of like to promote his friends, to promote the books that he's doing. Here's the stuff that's available across all the different publishers that he's done, and how and when and where you could pay, pre-order them, right?
Right.
And, he gives, a nod to some of his friends that have stuff coming out, specifically the upcoming Brubaker and Phillips graphic novel. Not that they need Chip to push their stuff, but that's still really cool, right?
Right.
But like right on the cover, some of the headlines that are on here, it says how to lose 10 pounds, very large, smaller font from your comic collection, even smaller font, throw away the ones drawn by Ryan Stegman.
Right.
The next saga, sorry, doesn't exist. Comics versus manga. Comics are winning if you look at this very specific sales chart. And how to pronounce distillery, DSTLRY, the publisher we had mentioned earlier. The answer may surprise you.
Yep, I love the answer may surprise you on anything, because they use that on magazines so much. Because
yes. And why is every CGC comic a 9.8?
Our team investigates the missing point too, Joe.
Yes. So again, that's just to give you an idea of what sort of humor it is. I'm sure there will be an online version of this available if you are signed up for Chip's newsletter. But if you are going to pick up your physical books this week, ask your retailer for a copy of this as well.
Right. And I was talking with young Josh this week, and he said, I guess this is going to be an ongoing thing. And future editions are going to be like 12 cents or something like that, which I'm like, if our retailer gets them, I'll buy every one of them. I'll give Chip 12 cents. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then on the back, Joe, there's something that has me interested. It's called Be Part of Something Stupid with Chip. We are just getting started unless the man stops us. If you want to advertise in Zdarsky Comic News, email our business manager, Deborah, for a rate card. And then I guess we'll have to make a rate card. I kind of want to find out what their advertising fee is, because I would love to have Chip Zdarsky's Comic News brought to you by my walk down Lois Lane show. Yeah. If you're going to swing the stick, swing the big stick. You know what I mean? Bring the Lois Lane. So
I will say this: when we're done recording here, everything's done and edited, and I should be sleeping. I'll be reaching out to that email when we're done here.
Right. I just found that amusing and had to bring it up to you.
For sure. So again, it's a busy week in comics, right?
Yep.
There are conventions going on this weekend. So, and this is so funny too. So I know. I'm gonna get into that and then get into this. So there's the Greater Austin Comic Con in Austin, Texas this weekend.
Right.
So the conventions that we have, not a lot of comic professionals here, just some interesting celebrity guests and stuff. Like James O'Barr is going to be at this one in Austin, but so is Weird Al Yankovic, who I know has done a convention in the 10 plus years that we've been doing this iteration of the show, but it's definitely been less than 5 times, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Marky Ramone is going to be there.
He's not a real Ramone, but anyway.
Okay. Donald Gibb is going to be there.
Nerds!
And Steve Guttenberg is going to be there.
The Goot is going to be there, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw, he was on a podcast recently that worked into my purview, like in reels and videos and stuff like that, which is Craig Ferguson. You know who Craig Ferguson is.
I know Craig Ferguson is. He had like a late night show or something.
Right. Which, really quick, is, to me, after Johnny Carson, maybe the best late night show I've ever seen. I'm that much of a fan of that old show. And he has a podcast now called Joy. And I'm like, okay, this may be the first podcast. Like we do a lot of bits on here where this is going to be the podcast I'm going to listen to. Salty Keith was one of them, rest in power, but that's no longer a thing. So I may do the Craig Ferguson one because he's fascinating as an interviewer. But he had Steve Guttenberg on. And he told Steve Guttenberg, he was like, you told me a story years ago about the 5 stages of stardom. And I absolutely love this thing. He goes, what are those? He goes, yeah, it happened to me. He goes, and I call it the 5 stages of Gutenberg. And he's like, when you're famous, or at some point if you're famous, this is how you get there and how it goes. Stage 1 is, who is Steve Guttenberg? Stage 2 is, get me Steve Guttenberg. Stage 3 is, get me a Steve Guttenberg type. Stage 4 is, get me a young Steve Guttenberg. And stage 5 is, who is Steve Guttenberg? And I love that because that, to me, everything I've ever seen or heard about stardom and any music, movies, TV, writing, well, not so much writing, but that's the trajectory of any star. And it cracked me up. And it was like, you know what? I'm genuinely going to think about trying out this podcast. So the 5 stages of the Goot, Joe.
Now, I don't want to discredit Steve Guttenberg, but
he says he learned it from Paul Newman.
Okay.
He gives him credit. He goes, Paul Newman told me that, but I'm not going to say that as he was telling the story, he was saying, I'll use me, you know what I mean? Because blah, blah, blah. But He goes, I learned that from Paul Newman when I met it. God only knows where Paul learned it, and you might have heard it somewhere else, Because
I actually heard Lewis Black do it in his act.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, very interesting to see that that's like a thing that goes throughout Hollywood and celebrity and so forth,
Right.
Also, this weekend is the 605 Pop Culture Con in Sioux City, Iowa.
Great name.
Where Rosario Dawson's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Starr is going to be there.
Ooh.
And George Takei is going to be there.
Nice.
No, it's oh my, we say.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. My.
Oh, my.
Yes. Now, this is one of those things where you may not believe me. This is the guest list, and I can only do one photo op. I might take George over the other 2.
Like I always say, if Rosario's in her Sin City outfit, I'm getting that.
Mm-hmm.
But since Anthony Starr's coming closer, to Jersey, I say we go out there and we do some guerrilla journalism and get an interview and get all his insights on cape work and milk.
Okay, more on that later on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are going to the Sioux City, Iowa convention this weekend, just a hop, skip, and a jump up the road, down the road, somewhere on the road, in Waterloo, Iowa, is the National Wrestling Hall of Fame award ceremony this weekend.
That is my Waterloo.
Okay. Okay. Again, it's, you're talking, Bradshaw's going to be there. Sergeant Slaughter's going to be there.
Okay.
Tito Santana, Arn Anderson, Tony Schiavone, Conrad Thompson. That's interesting that he's going to be there. Dr. Tom Pritchard, Sweet Brucey's older brother.
Okay.
There's a just like how the 5 stages of celebrity thing. Mm-hmm. There's a famous discourse in the world of professional wrestling is that I'd take a bullet for Dr. Tom and put one in Brucey.
Oh my God.
Right. Yeah, Brucey has a good laugh about it. But friend of the show, Mark Cole is going to this convention this weekend as a vendor with his wares, and Phil Hester is also going to be at this convention as well, because apparently Phil Hester's a big wrestling guy.
Right. A lot of comic people are.
Yes.
So
there's many more people. And again, do I really want to get into a conversation with Todd right now about who Bob Roop is?
You could.
Do I need to get into a 20-minute discussion about Rock Riddle? I can tell you it's not Matt's father.
I was just going to ask if it was Rob Riggle, but you said Riddle. So
yes. But again, that's quite the interesting thing. Again, in my mind, if they're in the same state, they're like right next to each other. But I would be willing to bet that Waterloo and Sioux City, Iowa, are on completely opposite ends of the state, to make attending both those conventions this weekend a virtual impossibility.
You never know. Maybe they're right on top of each other.
Maybe.
If you're lucky.
But we'll have the links to all of these in the show notes with the show post that goes up, of course. Where you could find it when the show goes live, just like you could find all the information available at soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. Anytime any of the shows in the network go live, of course you could find them at their own individual websites. Of course you could find them through the podcatcher of your choice, but you could also find this information everywhere in one stop, soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. And that, of course, includes this show that you're listening to right now, Longbox Heroes After Dark, Puzzle Warriors 3, Profane Arguments, Porch Talk, Wings on Wings, At Odds with Wrestling, Final Wrestling Place, We Need Wrestling, and I don't know, if Ed does something. I saw Ed this weekend. He looks a lot like Uncle Howdy. I don't know what that means, but I was told I have to say that as well.
Does he look more like Captain Howdy?
No, Uncle Howdy.
Okay.
But if Ed has something cooking, it'll appear up on soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. You could also check out some of our other friends and stuff that they are up to and doing in and around the internet. Go check out West Coast retailer extraordinaire Mike Sterling's blog over at progressiveruin.com. Go check out our friend Kevin's blog over at helionsteam.com. He actually lives in upstate New York, right outside of like Syracuse, maybe like in Rome, New York, and they got hit with tornadoes today.
Did you see the pictures he posted?
I saw the pictures he posted. He said he's okay.
Good.
His son's okay. Everyone's okay, but the devastation was wild to see.
Right, to see that church with like the roof ripped off, and like an old time church where they build them strong. I was like, woof.
So if you're in the if you're listening, you're in the greater upstate New York area. Hopefully you're safe. Hopefully your family is safe, and then worry about your belongings and so forth later. But yeah, some wild stuff, man. That's the only acceptable weather talk on the show.
Right. And I will always say, I heard this line years ago, like with stuff like this, hurricanes, tornadoes, don't cry over anything that can't cry over you.
There you go. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
You can check out Rick Williams' The Chop Shop at freekaratechops.storenvy.com. You can go check out Jason Sandberg's Jupiter a la carte over at his Indiegogo. You can go check out Chris Runt's Battle Monsters self-published book over at fortressofcomicnews.com. Our friend Davey of the band Cave People has his own self-published comics that you could find over at cavedomaincomics.com. And if you do not have a comic book store in your area, or you do not have a good comic book store in your area, let our store be your store. Comics on the Green. I have the Facebook page linked up anytime the books are in, or if they're going to be late. Hopefully there's no tornadoes this week in our neck of the woods. But if there is, you can find out if the books are going to be late through the Facebook page. You can find out the final order cutoff dates for the latest and greatest upcoming hottest books. there as well. And you could sign up for the mail order subscription service, get your books mailed to you weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. And if you do, there's a chance you can get a sketch on the package from our good friend Becky, who we're going to turn things over to now for My Walk Down Lois Lane.
Welcome back to My Walk Down Lois Lane. Today we're going to talk about issue 54 from 1965, so let's dive in. Superman uses his X-ray vision to see Perry coming into the office with an assignment and escapes before he's forced to do any work. That is 100% what I would use supervision for. Lois is given the assignment to visit a scientist named Dr. Alder, who has just finished 10 years of scientific dimensional space travel research and wants to write an article about it. They have to stop sending Lois to these. It's always a problem. Dr. Alder shows her a machine that opens dimensions. He turns it on and it opens a portal to a different planet. Inside is a monster who comes crashing through. The monster slaps Dr. Alder so hard he's going to feel like he jumped dimensions when he wakes up, and the monster grabs Lois. Just when she thinks she's done for, the monster, who looks like E.T. and a pink Bigfoot merged and grew tentacle arms, introduces himself as Herco, and he likes the look of Lois. They go outside and a car swerves at the sight of Herco and almost hits Lois, but Herco picks it up and crushes it, protecting her. The cops come and immediately start shooting like this is Gotham City, and Lois begs them to leave him alone and she will take him somewhere safe. The cops visit Dr. Alder and tell him put Herco back where he came from, and Dr. Alder says he will once the machine recharges, but until then this is all on Lois. Meanwhile, Lois and Herco are at the park where he spots a man giving a woman a bouquet of flowers. Herco rips up a tree and tries to hand it to Lois. He also walks over to the little outside zoo, bends the bars, grabs a leopard, and tries to offer it to Lois as a pet. She realizes that he has a crush on her and decides he's not so bad and he's treating her nicer than Superman ever has, but she has to get him away from the park before he causes more damage. Downtown, Herco spots a jewelry store with an engagement ring, so he snaps a lamppost, bends it into a circle, and tries to give it to her. Jimmy Olsen sees Lois and Herco and snitches to Superman, who asks no questions and just immediately flies down and starts trying to hit Herco. Superman is getting his butt kicked, and Lois tells him to stop. Herco is her friend, and to go see if the machine is ready. It is, so Lois and Herco return to the lab, where Lois tricks him and pretends she's going home with him. She walks through the portal, and Lois is grabbed by Superman before it shuts. She asks the doctor if he could make a quick peephole so she can see if he's all right, and the story ends with Herco looking devastated, while Lois feels guilty that she tricked him. So this issue is reprinted in 113 from 1971. That is the annual issue that contains the Dr. Drolic story, where he was a secret blue goblin man that Lois accidentally killed. Are you sad Herco is gone? Don't worry, he makes a return and we will cover it next week. Tune in for more Lois.
Thank you very much, Becky. Again, back to a more lighter fare, a more fun fare. And there's just something about the name of that character there, Herco, that I just love that.
Listen, I learned how to court a woman from Herco, Joe. All the things. And I've had, women give me the brush off the same way. They would shunt me to another dimension and close the door rapidly. I don't know how many times that's happened to me.
Yes.
But hopefully we're going to get, more of Herco, and hopefully, we'll find out if a monster can find love, Joe. So there might be hope for some of us out there.
Well, I'm proof that at least one has.
That's true.
And I shouldn't talk about April that way when she can't defend herself. So.
That is true. And also, Becky feeling better after last week. So good for her.
So let's get into what we read from this past week. Where would you like to begin?
I would like to start with Action Comics 1067 by Gail Simone and art by Eddie Barrows. which is more like a flashback story because with the absolute power stuff going on, this is like a flashback back when Clark was working for WGBS, the TV show, the TV network, the news network. So it's them, going to get an interview from somebody, and it's kind of taken from the look of Superman versus Muhammad Ali. Because a lot of the panels are taken straight from that. The dress, I kind of like the homage to it. And it kind of has the same story arc where, like, an alien comes and they want to, battle for the right of the planet to live or die, kind of that old, tried and true trope. And Superman shows up to stop them as they're, beaming down into Metropolis. And he gets named as the champion, and through some flukes, or like you can have two people alongside you, and accidentally gets choosing Lois and Jimmy by accident, through a phrase that he didn't realize that he had to pick right there. This, to me, it was a fun book. I like the idea because I felt like the way Gale was writing, it's a throwback to the Silver Age, obviously-ish, but also with a lot of the word, like, they're not word balloons, the exposition in, like, the boxes and stuff like that. I felt like I was listening, even though I was reading it, to like a Superman serial on the radio. It had that, like, feel to the way the dialogue was written and the exposition was written. And obviously we end up getting like the cliffhanger of how things go sideways. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I love Eddie Barrows' art. I loved him back from like all the stuff he did, like Suicide Squad, and Nightwing was one of my favorite stuff of his. And so it looks absolutely pretty. So yeah, I like this issue of Action.
Yeah, and we'll actually get into the second feature, the backup story, here shortly, which is a more modern, up-to-date, and everything else like that. I have not read a lot of Silver Age Superman stuff, admittedly. Mm-hmm. And you mentioning that there's direct allusions to set up the Superman versus Muhammad Ali stuff from this.
Right.
I was definitely, like, at first, I'm like, oh, the costume and the fact that they're working for a TV station and all this other stuff. I'm like, do I need to wrap my head around exactly where this is taking place in, like, old Superman continuity? Mm-hmm. And there's a scene in here where Superman disarms the aliens, and in doing so, he eats one of their guns.
Right.
And at that point, I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to along for the ride. This is going to be a fun story. You know, exactly. If you want to throw some Silver Age goofiness in here with a modern twist, I'm all for it.
Right.
And that's what a lot of this was.
Yep, like I said, because it kind of has the same plot, but definitely different, because they end up making Superman fight Muhammad Ali, where obviously they have a champion on this. I like to think this is like a modern take on it, that you're not going to have Muhammad Ali now fighting in it, but yeah, definitely fun. And I did like the as we're going to mention now, the backup, because isn't the writer one of your favorites now, Joe? Too?
It's definitely someone I like, but I just want to mention a couple other bits that I thought were fun from the main story.
Yep.
Is the aliens allow Superman to choose two partners that he could come on this adventure alongside of him, and we get the bit of Superman pondering, like, oh, I should take Batman and a Wonder Woman with me, obviously, and they're like, oh, well, Jimmy and Lois are here, that's who your partners are, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was like a fun misdirect in the book as well. And again, I don't want to say misdirect because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But Superman has the battle with Galalox the Handsome.
Right.
And I thought that was a good reveal as well, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's like Muhammad Ali saying, I'm so pretty.
Yes. And then, of course, the second feature, the backup feature, written by Rainbow Rowell, who is coming off her run doing She-Hulk over at Marvel. The artist on this is Cian Torrey. And, obviously it looks very modern, very up-to-date, very in line with the current Superman books. And that's essentially what the story is. It's Lois having a crisis of, she's currently the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet, while Perry White is running for mayor of Metropolis. and there is a call that goes out in regards to the atomic skull. Superman goes to stop the assault, and again, it's while she's gone, or while Superman is gone, this is where Lois decides she's going to make her hard line in the sand, and essentially it is not letting Clark handle any of the Superman stories for the Daily Planet anymore, citing a conflict of interest.
Yep.
And the thing about it is, Lois is right. But, you know, obviously Lois having the chance to stand up and, you know, being able to have that power over Superman, Clark, is an interesting take for this angle on the story, of course. And I forget what it is because I'm not allowed to call them this, but I always like, especially Superman, for some reason, more so than any other character. I always notice that it happened a lot of times in X-Men, but I like more so when it happens in a Superman comic where Superman does not call the villain that he's fighting by their code name or their villainous name, but he calls them by their shoot name.
Right.
And I think Superman is and should be the only person who's allowed to get away with that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Cap could get away with it, Joe.
Maybe,
but definitely Superman. And I'm with you. I like the bit that you mentioned too with the conflict of interest because Lois has to do it because Perry never knew. You know what I mean? Never knew that he was Superman. So covering the stories and saying it's someone else is not very, you know, it's not like the rules of news. So like them saying it, but Perry's off the hook because, you know, he didn't do it. I thought that was a very interesting twist that, you know, that there's something new in the long history of Superman. So I like the backup story too.
Mm-hmm. So the other book that we've read from this past week is From the World of Minor Threats, Barfly #1. Written by Kyle Starks with art by Ryan Brown. This is the story of the henchman of one of the many villains from the Minor Threats books, universe, what have you. I'll admit, unfamiliar with any and all of it, but this book does a good job of filling you in with this, and I'll kind of get into a little bit of that momentarily. But our lead character, he's named Barfly on the cover of the book, because I don't think we could put on the cover of this book what they actually call him in the book. This is a family-friendly show. So he was a henchman of one of these big villains. The villain is in jail, so now what's he going to do? And he gets himself, he has like a 9-to-5 job working at a low-rent, rundown fast food place. I bet you they don't even have an app. He then gets involved with some folks that are going to do a robbery, a smash and grab at a bookstore that might have a money laundering front. Did I mention that the lead character is a human fly character who does not speak, mostly just through nonverbal cues, unless it's to other bug-like creatures throughout the course of the book?
Right.
This book is... So this is the strangest thing I can mention about this book, and I mean this in the best way possible. There's a lot of information to take in this book, but it gives it to you in a way that does not dumb it down for you. They don't really slow down for you, but it's presented in a way that it lets you know, like, this is the stuff that's going to be important later. This is just the stuff that you need to know for the flavor of this world that you're in. And then conversely, the art, there is literally 5 to 7 gags in the background of every page. And it's not distracting. If you don't notice the gags, it's not going to affect your enjoyment of the book. But if you notice the gags, I think it helps add to the humor and the lightness of what this book is to help maybe alleviate some of the heaviness that might be in here. And again, it's not heavy like it's a deep topic. It's just, never having read a Minor Threats book, it's giving me the information that I need to know to enjoy this story, and I think the creative team does a great job of that.
I agree. I bite-sized morsels when it comes to like handing out the information without overwhelming you. The gags are funny. The bit that I like, and I don't know if it's kind of a Kyle Stark staple now, is sound effects to things that shouldn't have sound effects. basically flipping a burger when the bar fly's working at the burger joint, and it's just like as he's flipping, instead of like swish or whatever sound it would be for flipping a grill, it's natural born griller, or him just like he puts up his hand and it's like high five, but that's not a sound effect, and it absolutely caught me every time that they did it. And I thought that was really ingenious, and it made me really love Barfly, because someone who doesn't speak is a really good job. But I'm with you. It's kind of like, oh, I don't know anything about the outside universe, so this was like a fun issue just for me because I'm a big Kyle fan,
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, if you have enjoyed the stuff that we have recommended from Kyle Starks, this is definitely a Kyle Starks book. It's just him playing in the playground of something that you may not be familiar with. You may not have been familiar with Peacemaker when he did Peacemaker outside of the TV show with John Cena in it, and I feel that rings close to that. You may not have been as familiar with the Pet Avengers as you may have been with, say, the regular Avengers, but Kyle did a good job of that. He's got coming up here in August, I think it is, September, he's got the Lobo one-shot that's coming up.
Right.
And I certainly have a feeling that Kyle is the perfect creator to play in that universe, in that world of whatever your thoughts, feelings, and emotions in regards to Lobo are. And, of course, his own creator-owned stuff that we talk about here as well. I definitely think that Kyle is someone who picks good projects that suit his sensibilities.
Yes, he definitely knows how to pick. Like, I don't doubt that he could do it, but I don't see, certain, different projects. He's like, yeah, maybe I'll just do this. I feel he's like a big 80s action movie guy, kind of.
He absolutely is.
Yeah, exactly. So
the other book that we're going to be discussing is a preview review book. Does not come out in stores until next Wednesday, the 24th. And that would be from Mad Cave Studios, written by Jeremy Adams with art by Will Conrad, and that would be Flash Gordon #1. They did a preview of this. The Free Comic Book Day was a brand new story to kind of set up this world. If I have a complaint, you kind of sort of need to read that. But if you missed it, when you pick up this, right on the inside front cover is a QR code. So pull up your SnipSnap app, scan the QR code, and you could read the Zero issue for free.
Yep.
And I really think you need to, because there's a lot of groundwork that's laid. I don't want to give away too many spoilers for the book, but I do want to let you know, Flash Gordon, in my mind, is the 80s movie. This is not that.
Yeah, I'm mad that Ming doesn't look like Max von Sydow. No, just kidding.
Right. A lot of people, Flash Gordon is the old serials or the old comic strips or the old anything, right? This looks like that, like the costuming and those sort of sensibilities, I feel, are that, but it's definitely not those as well. This is its own thing. It's taking whatever conceptions you have from however it is that you accessed Flash Gordon, and it's giving it a modern twist. It's a little bit more... I can see that there might be people that are like, okay, that scene was a little bit too violent, let's say.
Right.
The scene where Flash figures out how to escape from where he's being kept captive.
Right.
He takes a big chance and a big risk, but there's a lot at stake with what he is attempting to do, especially when he hears who he's in prison with, the information that he gets in regards to. And again, I'm going to try to tiptoe around this because I don't want to spoil some of this stuff, especially if you haven't read the Zero issue. But I will say, I really like this a lot.
I agree. I'm with you. I'm the Flash Gordon 80s movie, but I've also I watched the sci-fi Flash Gordon show too when it was on in that was the 90s or the early 2000s. I think it was on Sci-Fi. And that wasn't great. But what I like about this is, and I won't go into the, like you said, the details from the Zero, like, and get it yourself. Is the only spoiler I'll give away is that after the events of issue 0, Flash Gordon is going to have an uphill battle with the people he's protecting.
There you go.
He's made some mistakes, but are they mistakes? Like when you see what he did, and he may not be. He's a hero, but he may not be a hero to the people, if that makes any sense. And I like this new angle that he's not going to show up and be cheered everywhere he goes. And to me, that's the fresh angle with Flash Gordon. It looks beautiful. The bit with, obviously, he has to break out of prison because he hears something's up with Dale, who he's been separated from, Dale Arden. And what that was an interesting choice. All around, as I went, I was like, okay, this is interesting. This issue's starting off in a prison. And then it goes and it turns into fun action, looks good. It gives me a cliffhanger. What, like I said, Flash has to do to make himself redeemed. I'm like, yeah, I'm all in on this, and especially since I read his Jeremy Adams run on Flash, which I loved, and a couple other things.
His current Green Lantern run.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to go through so many of his stuff. This is going right to the top of my list because I had fun with this.
Yeah. And, one of the other Mad Cave books that we've discussed on here is the Dick Tracy book, 2 very different books. But at least from that idea, I think where, depending on how familiar you are with the subject matter, you might read this book and be like, oh my God, this completely betrays everything that this character is about. But even if you don't have that preconceived notion, it's a great story from the rip. As you mentioned, again, trying to be as spoiler-free as possible, but it's not like Flash Gordon comes in as some brash and careless hero. He comes in with good intentions, he completes his mission, but then the ramifications of his mission, as Todd mentioned, gives him an uphill climb to prove himself to the people that his intentions were to save.
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously there's a lot of familiar names. You mentioned about how the action in this, the art is beautiful. I love how Will Conrad is a fantastic artist.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend this book. I don't know. I'm sure the final order cutoff date has come and gone since the book comes out next week. But definitely go check it out if you get the chance. I would assume if the QR code is scannable in the physical book that they'll probably be putting the 0 issue up online somewhere. Read the 0 issue if you get the chance. If that's good. Like, I read the 0 issue and I was sold, waiting for this book to come out. So I read issue 1 and I'm even more sold on the continuation of this book.
Right, because I'm not so much up on it, but I don't know where you would get digital books, not by the company. Do you know what I mean? But I remember when a lot, like, Comixology, is that still a thing? I know we
it's through Amazon, but yeah.
Right. It might be there because they always have the free comic book days for free, There might be a bunch of different places. Like you said, Mad Cave might have it somewhere on their site where you can get that link or code to go to it. So give it a try.
What I might do with this is to see if they have issue 0 available on their website currently.
Right. On Mad Cave, you mean?
Yes. And then put the link, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah. Making a note for myself for that. So anyway, that's what we read this week. Let's get into what we're looking forward to coming out this week. If you head over to longboxheroes.com, every Tuesday around noon Eastern time, we put up the pull post, which is a link to all the books that are coming out this week. Whether you get your books in print, whether you get them digitally, whether you get them sent to your home, however it is, be forewarned, be forearmed, know what's coming out this week. Todd and I attempt to guess what the others most looking forward to coming out this week. Todd is currently in the lead over me with 1 correct guess. And I would have to go back through the history of this bit on the show. But I think this is the first time in a long time we have the exact same books that we're getting this week.
Right.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, well, if you're getting this, we'd have the same thing. Or like, oh, you're getting everything I'm getting plus 1 extra book. Nope. Right down the line.
Yep.
Same
right
books.
Right down the middle, Joe.
Right down the middle, Daddy. I'm doing the thing, and people know what the thing is. I am going to guess the book that you're most looking forward to coming out this week is Namor #1.
It is Namor #1 by Jason Aaron. So I'm going to swing the boomerang back around. Is the book you're looking forward to most also Namor #1?
It is.
No movement.
Yep. And again, Jason Aaron, like, low-key in the middle of, like, 15 other books that get announced. All of a sudden, like, there's a Namor book, and it's an 8-issue miniseries. And, yeah.
If Namor doesn't look like an Aztec, I'm out of there, Joe.
All right. I don't know if Jay Lee is still working, but I did see there is not a Jay Lee variant cover, sadly.
Oh.
Yeah. And I will say I will have the link in the show notes just as a side note. Mad Cave does have the 0 issue available up on their website for you to read of Flash
Sweet.
Gordon. So I will make sure that that is linked up. In the show notes with all of this here today, right? While you're over at longboxheroes.com, be sure to check out past episodes of this show, past episodes of Longbox Heroes After Dark, and again, of course, our current ongoing Todd and Joe Have Issues as we are rereading all of Gail Simone's Secret Six. Starting from the very beginning, we've gone through Villains United, we've gone through Birds of Prey, and we are finally in the main run. We're about a third of the way through, and we're on issue 12, Secret Six, written by Gail Simone, art by Nicola Scott. And where we last left our heroes, they were confronted by Wonder Woman. And this book does a very good job of selling not only the importance, but also how powerful Wonder Woman is. Since everyone sells her accordingly, the characters that you think would have a moment with Wonder Woman do get their moments with Wonder Woman, specifically Deadshot. If I have a complaint, I wish we would have gotten a little bit more of Ragdoll and Wonder Woman together.
Right.
But we get little to none in regards to that. Deadshot, what do they say? More guts than brains sort of thing when it comes to his handling of Wonder Woman. He gets the line of like, listen, I'm going to try to shoot you, but you're going to do that bullets and bloomers things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's close enough, right? And of course she does exactly what he thinks she's going to do. Wonder Woman pretty much dispatches him pretty quickly. Jeanette is the one who kind of takes point against Wonder Woman, and we get a whole build-up here. She's kind of going toe-to-toe. Jeanette tells Scandal and the rest of the Six to kind of hightail, get as far away as possible. Scandal knows what she's going to do. The rest of the crew don't know what Jeanette's going to do. But I think we, knowing that Jeanette is a Banshee, is going to do what she's going to do. Mm-hmm. And I like the bit where we get to see her in her full Banshee form. I love the design of the DC Universe Banshees.
Yeah, the black and white, like almost like an Alice Cooper look. You know what I mean?
Yes.
With the sunken eyes and the makeup around the mouth. Very stunning because black and white, like in a comic character, just like they're just so dynamic as opposed to each other. So it looks really good.
Right. And I think this is something that maybe we may have known before, but I like revisiting it here, in that the song that the Banshee sings to, kind of incapacitate their prey, or whatever you want to say that as, is, in this instance, the song of their own demise, right?
Right.
And I think that's such a good bit, and they do a good job of putting Jeanette over, of being someone who she not only defeats Wonder Woman, but I would say that she pretty much incapacitates Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really good way to kind of put her over. But of course, we also get how much that takes out of her as well. And while all of this is going on, Artemis gets a chance to get revenge on her captors for the way that they had treated her while they were in the captive of Mr. Smythe, who is the villain of this whole thing that hired the Secret Six to assist him in capturing folks so that he could build his giant prison. Again, allegories to what is and may be going on in the current season of The Boys. There is some good... there's one of the... obviously it was drawn this way, I assume, but as Scandal and Bane are getting themselves situated to go out and fight, and Scandal makes the plea to Bane, like, I need you to be the Bane, like the mask and the venom and the whole thing. And Scandal is there addressing Artemis in the top and gauntlets of her superhero outfit and a pair of spotted boxer shorts.
Right.
And that's like such a good, fun visual, right?
Right.
And the end of the issue is we are introduced to what Mr. Smythe has locked up. And if you are familiar with the mythos of Wonder Woman, then you know who and what it is, but I don't want to spoil it here, so we can talk about it next week. I know I kind of controlled the conversation on that one, but this one was just more of a straightforward issue, kind of more focused on what the Wonder Woman and Jeanette stuff was, and everybody else got like little bits to do, you know?
And I'll say, I'll just hit a couple of things that I like. The scene where you talk about where you have to be the Bane, and that means Venom. When she looks at him, and I'm going to talk about too the Nicola's art in this too, is like she legitimately looks like hurt that she has to ask. But Joe, I get goosebumps every time I look at those two panels where she's like, and that means Venom, and he's like, I see. So this is where we are, and with so little provocation. Bane looks legitimately hurt. Like, you just helped me overcome, like the withdrawals of a super addictive drug, and you're just so willing to throw me to the wolves. Such a great character scene in it, and how the teams fall apart because they attack each other, and as they go their separate ways after the Banshee, it's like you're like, are they gonna get back together in this? Because they even say guess we're gonna need some new losers because Secret 3 ain't got no zing to it. And I'm like, that's a great line. But the thing that I absolutely love the most, and it jumps out at me, is when Wonder Woman shows up. There's the first big splash page, and she's like, wants to know what's going on. And then they cut to her panels with the full page, and it's just little panels of her in the tiara, and then it's the top of Bane's head with the widow's peak. Then her eye and Jeanette's eye, Catman with the shirt ripped open. You can see the scar, her eagle on her chest, her bracelet, the gun from Deathshot, the claws on Scandal with the lasso, and then just the boots. The way this is done, it should look stupid, and it doesn't. It just seems like something that someone has on the Secret Six and how it relates to something on Wonder Woman. Plus, each of these things, the way they're held, kind of, as I know, I may be going too deep into this psychologically, they handle themselves. It gives me an insight to what their character is, just like the way Wonder Woman is just standing with her boots, but Ragdoll is in a weird, on his tiptoes. It just gives me a little bit of their character in a small panel, and I absolutely love that page. And it should look ridiculous, but it doesn't. It looks amazing, Joe.
And I'll say this in that, I hate the use of when people say oh, that's cinematic. But I definitely feel as though they were going for a cinematic, whether you're talking about a Western, whether you're talking about some sort of crime sort of thing, where the characters are having that showdown, that standoff, and the camera is cutting to these moments. And those panels very much feel like they're intended to be camera cuts, as though this issue of the comic is a movie.
Right, instead of a patchwork Frankenstein thing that it actually is. You know what I mean? I get it. Reminds me of The Good and the Bad and the Ugly when they're standing at the grave and they keep cutting back to each person. That's exactly the way I felt it was.
Perfect. But this was a really good issue. I lament about the covers not being Nicola Scott covers. Somehow I will live and get over it because the story is so good. And do they give away? No, I was going to say if they give away who the villain is on the cover of the next issue, I would say, but I won't. So tune in next week and we'll talk about issue 13 where the villain will get revealed and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I absolutely love the fact that this is one of those books that I don't have a lot of memory of. I have the high points, the key points.
Yeah.
So this is a book that I'm reliving again. Like, I forgot about the reveal at the end, and I forgot this, and I forgot that. So it's almost like I'm getting to reread Secret Six again, Joe, because I haven't read it in 10 years.
Right.
It's so great to be able to do that with a book. Oh, my God, I love it.
Yep, absolutely.
Next week it is.
So while you're over at longboxheroes.com, of course, you can head over to our little store and buy shirts and pins and stickers with our fancy logo on them. This weekend, however, is also the TeePublic sale. 35% off designs and stuff inspired by this show, by Longbox Heroes After Dark, by the soon-to-be-named network itself. 35% off on those designs on everything from cell phone covers to throw pillows to 2 different kinds of hats.
Yeah.
Also, you could head over to our eBay affiliate link. This page contains affiliate links for eBay. We may receive a small commission on purchases you make. You could use the affiliate link anytime you want to buy anything on eBay and support us at the same time.
Yeah.
Also, and lastly, the best way to support us is by signing up for the Patreon at patreon.com/longboxheroes. For as little as $1 a month, you're going to get 2 bonus shows from Todd and myself. One would be Previewing the Past, where we look at 30 years ago, this month's previews catalog. The other is Comic Book Oddities, where we look at some of the stranger, more maligned, maybe forgotten, mostly pre-Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff of comic properties trying to come to either the silver or the small screen. This is a small screen offering this week, as we will be discussing the challenge and the roast of the Super Friends.
Joe, as it gets closer, I'm quivering with anticipation.
Yes, this is a project that is 45 years old.
Mm-hmm.
When this aired on TV, and thanks to Todd to show you how hardworking and how excited Todd is for this one, we will have a bunch of ancillary additional materials to go along with the episodes itself.
Right.
So, like I said, at $1 a month, you're going to get those 2 shows. $5 a month, you're going to get those 2 shows 2 weeks before everyone else. You're also going to get Longbox Heroes After Dark 2 days before everyone else. So you can listen to the shows in the correct listening order. No matter what level you are on the Patreon, you are going to get full access to the preview catalogs that we talk about on Previewing the Past. Full color, high quality scans, expertly done all the way back to 1990 of those previews catalogs. Like I said, sometimes those Previewing the Past episodes are unwieldy. They're big episodes. We have a lot of fun recording them. 3 hours plus, and sometimes you just don't have that sort of time in your day. I understand that. Look back, look at the covers of those preview catalogs. I think I have everything in a collection on the Patreon. So you could just pull up the catalogs, look at the covers, and say, I remember that. That's when I started reading comics. What is that? And just flip through it digitally and walk down that past, that history of comics. And then, listen to an episode. Listen to more than one episode. Listen to everything that we put out.
Yes. My walk down Previewing the Past, right?
Yes. So let's get into some TV talk. I assume we're going to start with The Acolyte, correct?
Yes, pretty much.
Right. So we talked before, early on in the season of The Acolyte, that we were going to get like the Rashomon thing.
Yep.
And this was that episode.
Right. I thought it was going to be through May's eyes, but it seems to be through the Jedi's eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of the kids.
But this is like their redo of episode 2 of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to find out what the Jedi did that was so bad.
Right.
And while I think what the Jedi did was bad, what I definitely, this episode in particular puts a light on the Jedi to show that maybe they're not as perfect as they think they are.
And I always felt, because I don't know if I remember if I said this on this episode last week or I was talking with Josh in the shop, that I feel ever since the original trilogy, which there was some mystery to the Jedi, when we get the prequels, all they end up is showing how inept the Jedi are. And this episode kind of cements it for me. It just feels like they're useless, they're pompous, they're, in their own heads kind of a deal, and it goes sideways. I just feel like Jedis are the worst at this point.
So I don't think it's a pompousness. I think it's more of we have a plan. Our way is the right way. And if the plan goes off the rails, even in the slightest, we're lost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more or less what happens in this is, as we saw in episode 2, they're attempting to recruit May and Osha, specifically Osha, because Osha's the good one, right?
And trying to think, May is, I kind of see it like May doesn't look like she starts the fire on purpose. Maybe it's an accident this time. But I could be wrong.
So I guess what we end up seeing here is that, yes, May is the one who starts the fire. The fire is allowed to get out of control as the Jedi escape, and the decision is very clearly made to take Osha. But that is not before there is definitely some signals that are misread, specifically the part. Now, I will give the Jedi not an excuse, not benefit of the doubt, not whatever, but there's the part where there's the big confrontation with the two mothers, the two heads of the witch clan, right?
Right.
And the one, goes into a very offensive posture with her, weapon that she has. Right. The other one starts to turn into some sort of smoke monster.
I call it the Nightcrawler Jedi because it seems like they could teleport with a bamf.
Okay. And then she, and again, which one? Anastasia, she starts to turn into smoke or something. She starts to turn May into smoke, it seems. May seems to be confused, scared, hurt. The Jedi seemingly think that maybe she's trying to hurt the child. So, Master Soul lashes out, sticks the lightsaber into the person who's turning into smoke, and kills her. And her last words were, Anastasia's words were, I was going to let her go with you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're dead now. She's coming with me anyway because we can't leave her here by herself. And then the other witches, they commune together, and they're singing a little song and humming a little ditty to mind control the Wookiee Jedi to attack the other Jedi. And then Carrie-Ann Moss Jedi comes in, breaks the mind control on the Wookiee Jedi, and by doing so, kills the other witches, incapacitates them, hurts them, something.
Right. Something very vague.
But they're definitely incapacitated. So with the one mother killed by Master Soul, the majority of the other witches incapacitated, the planet falling apart because of a fire, the decision is made to just save what they can, which is just Osha. So the episode ends with Master Soul explaining to Osha more or less the way that Obi-Wan explains Darth Vader's origins to Luke Skywalker in the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
Leaving out key parts that they probably could have prevented from happening, but technically not lying.
Right. I'm going to say I feel it like the other mother's name is Coril or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like she's behind all of this. Even though you say she takes the harsh stance, but she gets in the one Jedi's head who just wants to go home to Coruscant because he's I'm tired of being out here. And Saul just wants a Padawan and he wants Osha. So they're the susceptible ones. So it's kind of like whatever happened, I put on the shoulders of the evil mother of the two, who I think is the Sith's master. You know what I mean? Like, that's who we're going to find out, because she leaves in a puff of Nightcrawler, and it's like, what's going on? So I just found this episode very, like, we see it again, the other side, as you say, but it's very like, like, not much has changed for me of what's happened. You know what I mean? Like, my view of everything. The only thing that I will say is a few episodes ago, I said that we were going to get a Wookiee Jedi battle, because, you know, we didn't have the one in the episode where he dies. And it was like, oh, we don't have the money for that. And it was like, I even said, anytime they say they don't have the money for something, it means, shut up, dummy. You're going to get it in an episode or two. And here it is. So I'll take my half victory lap on this one.
I'm enjoying the show. I get where you're coming from. Like, we didn't learn anything new. We knew the Jedi did something dumb, or they did something wrong. But like I said, what they did was not surprising, I guess, would be the best way to say it.
Right. And I'll say the worst thing that they did in this episode was use the word M count.
Oh, I didn't even pick up on that.
When he takes they take the blood, because that's one of the things. They're on this planet because of a vergence. They're like, this planet was dead X amount of like years ago, and now there's life where there was none. So they're kind of doing the whole like life from nothing, which Darth Vader and stuff. And then this time they show it from a different point of view, where he takes the blood and she goes in to take the test. But instead of seeing her go in and take the test, we see them talk about her blood, because you're like, the twins have an M count. And they're like, she's like, yeah, so what? They, you know, a lot of twins have the same, like, he's like, no, it's exactly the same. The M count is exactly the same, which should not happen, because even in twins that we have met who have it, they're always off. So someone engineered this. And I'm like, oh my God, were you, like, is this Disney's way of saying, see, we didn't say metachlorines, but if we say M count, you won't notice? And I'm like,
I didn't notice.
I noticed, you know, so. Yeah, but other than that, I'm like, now we go into the final episode. I mean, I'm here. It's not like I'm going to stop at 7 with 8 is, you know, so it is what it is.
Well, speaking of another one that's going to have the season finale coming up, let's talk about the boys from this week, huh?
Oh, yeah. Should be a short talk, Joe.
Yeah. Well, you know, and again, it's, okay. So the plan is coming together in regards to what Homelander's plan is, and in regards to what the boys' plan is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both of their plans are going to fail, because at their heart, these characters are all a bunch of lovable losers. Some more lovable than the last.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to go through the full narrative of everything, like beat by beat from story to story, but I think it's best to go through everything by character, even though here we are, penultimate episode, more and more the characters are kind of lining up with their stories. So, like, you can't talk about what Huey's doing without talking about what Starlight's doing. Can't talk about what Starlight's doing without talking about Billy, right? So everyone's kind of right. But I could talk about Frenchie and Kimiko, who get like the real, true heart feeling moments of this. Billy breaks Frenchie out of jail against his will to help Samir, the guy who Billy had cut off his leg. He's the one that engineered the virus in the first place. And because they don't have the lab, they don't have the fancy stuff, and Frenchie thrives off not having the lab and having, like, junk science, essentially. That's why they're working together. Frenchie and Kimiko have that moment where Frenchie kind of gets to explain why he didn't want any visitors when he was in prison. Kimiko kind of, you know, lets Frenchie know a little bit more about her past in regards to the things that she's done and how she sees herself. And of course, these two are the most redeemable characters on the show, because they plan, like, okay, well, after Samir's done doing this, we're going to let him go. we're not going to let Billy keep him. We're going to let him go. We're going to do the right thing. And, of course, that ends up backfiring on them because Samir gets like a syringe of the stuff and stabs it into Kimiko, makes his getaway, and then Frenchie has to cut Kimiko's leg off to stop the virus from visibly spreading through her body.
One of the tough scenes for me in this episode, Joe.
Just one of?
Just one of. Bit.
I'll ask, instead of using the axe like he did, would it have been more or less tough if to cut off her leg, Frenchie used piano wire?
Oh, you reminded me. I forgot about that. Now it's ingrained with this. Oh. But yeah, the whole bit with that, I was like, that was tough. And it's kind of like, kind of fitting that they have to cut her leg. Obviously, he's going to grow back because of what they did to Samir. But Samir also drops like, hey, before I leave, your boy's crazy, and he's talking to people who aren't there. You know what I mean? So now we have an in to like Butcher's, insanity kind of a deal. But yeah, I did like the Kimiko Frenchie bit, and it's nice to see people on this team, as you mentioned, confide in each other instead of lie to each other. So maybe maybe we've turned the bend on all these people deceiving each other, Joe. Or not.
Like I said, I think Frenchie and Kimiko might be the only two redeemable people. M is close, but he's definitely conflicted in what to do because obviously his bit is at the end of the last episode, he has the cardiac arrest, he has the heart attack, he passes out during the big break-in at the party at Tech Knight's place. So he's like, all right, I'm done. I'm turning everything back over to Butcher, and I'm out. He gets the tickets to get the wife and the kid. Now, is this me, Todd? Have we seen his kid at all this season? They talk about her, but I don't think we've seen her.
I think she shows up in one scene. Yes, okay. Because it was the scene that she was in the fight. It was in the fight, and he comes home to talk to her. Okay. And they kind of go at it, and she says, go to your room. He says, go to your room, kind of a deal. That's what I remember. Anyway.
Yeah, because it feels like a concerted effort not to show her a bunch. And I was just wondering if there's a reasoning why, but... So essentially what it comes down to is he gets the tickets for them to leave. MM's wife, Monique, is like, no, come with us. Forget all this. You're not leading them. Like you deserve this just as much as anyone else. He hems and haws about whether or not he's going to do it. It looks like he's going to do it. But again, of course, he needs to see this mission out to the end because they fully have A-Train on board.
Right.
A-Train is figured out to be the leak after many, many more attempts to find out who the leak is by Firecracker. Todd, I'm going to make a bold statement here. I don't think Firecracker is very bright.
What? But all the news that she was talking about, she seemed to be very informative.
Mm-hmm. Seems to be informative. Mm-hmm. I think she might not be. Because obviously she thinks that the leak is the web, or the what's the
Web Weaver.
Web Weaver, and so he is not the leak, but he definitely maybe has sprung a leak.
He's a leak. He's a slight leak, or figuratively, but he's a big leak literally.
Yes. Firecracker thinks that he's the one who is giving the boys the information, not realizing that they just kind of took advantage of him and drugged him and stole his costume. Again, that's good enough for Firecracker, I assume. Not good enough for Homelander, who just with his bare hands tears him in half.
May have been another tough scene for Todd.
See, these are the scenes that I love in this show. Visceral, gore, just repulsive, disgustive stuff. And Firecracker looking on shocked. Like, I can't believe Homelander did this. It's not like he has a pattern of behavior where if something doesn't go slightly his way, he just murders the person in the most gruesome way possible.
Pretty much. That's, I think, his calling card at this point, Joe.
Right. And as I mentioned, of course, because of what had happened at the party with them, the boys getting the drop on Sage, Homelander essentially fires her, sends her home. But again, we're all kind of all over the place, but we have to explain these sort of things in this way. Before she goes home, she gets to have a moment where she interacts with both the Deep and Black Noir, who apparently both have been having a relationship with Sage behind the other's back.
But one doesn't have to lobotomize there.
Yes.
Which was a nice touch.
That speaks volumes for the Deep. And as I mentioned before, if this episode is where we learn that Kamiko and Frenchie are probably the most redeemable characters in the show. Not that he was a Deep character, pun intended, in the first place. This is where the Deep becomes the most lamentable character on the show with his actions in this episode.
What, when he hurts his poor octopus girlfriend?
Yes, when he purposely allows her to die.
Go ahead.
In a fit of rage because she has figured out that the Deep is cheating on her with Sage, but she is willing to work on it because they have something special. The Deep freaks out and then just like breaks her tank, leaves her in the closet, and we just hear her gasping and wheezing and dying. That was the moment for me, like how you talk about, oh, Kamiko's leg and Web Weaver being ripped apart. Like, oh, that's old hat to Joe. Bring it on. But that part with the CGI octopus crying and slowly dying and we don't see it, that affected me more than the other stuff.
Wow. You do have a heart, Joe.
I do.
But the bit that I love with the octopus dying is he's outside the door and it's happening. And you know how like when someone murdered, like in every cliche way, they murder somebody and as they're dying, they're like, help me. And when the final gurgle comes, they have that angst-ridden moment where they're like, I can't believe I did it. Whatever that moment is. And she keeps like gurgling and then you think she's dead and Deep tries to have that moment, but she gurgles again, which he's such a phony because it's like, oh, I like he would have that moment if he killed her, but it's just like, that's all for him, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? It's just so put together and it makes the Deep such an even more dirtbag. And the one thing I do want to say about Noir, which I found fascinating that I found out this week, was the original Noir. Obviously, he takes off the mask and he's an actor, right? But those are the only scenes that person is the Noir. The guy who plays him now was Noir every time the first Noir was just in the costume, if that makes any sense. So, yeah. So like now I like the fact that they're like, they're giving him some face time. But I only found out that this week. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Right. And we do get a good bit where the Deep and Noir show up to the boys' headquarters, looking to whoop up on Starlighter and Billy, and this is where they end up getting saved. Starlighter and Billy end up getting saved by A-Train and MM, and this is where we get the full-fledged babyface turn of A-Train. We get a bunch of stuff with A-Train and Amanda. You know, you didn't turn me in, you didn't turn me in, you know, let's escape together. And of course, Amanda really having issues of what she should do in regards to this. Will she finally be able to get out of Vought Industries not in a body bag by the time this season is over, Todd?
And if not a body bag, Ziploc bag, you know,
right, or a bucket, as Homelander. That was a great moment when he says to Sage, he's like, I'm letting you leave here under your own power and go back to your home instead of you being sent back in a bucket.
Yes. So the battle with them and A-Train shows up. So this is the big reveal when now people know that A-Train is the leak. And I do like that bit. And he ends up going back, like Deep and Noir end up going back and cut back to like when they get rid of Sage. He's like, oh, he's the leak. Like he knows who it is now. So he tells Sage to leave. But Sage says, like, you don't understand. This was my plan the whole time. I knew he was the leak. And I was using him to leak information that I want them to have. And Homelander's like, I don't care. Leave before I murder you. And she ends up leaving, and I don't know if I said, she leaves a notebook, and I want to know what's in that notebook, and I think it's her plan, and eventually Homelander's going to read it. And this was all part of it. And there may be more when we get into the last two subplots. So
right. Of course, we have the stuff with Ryan. Ryan is the human character on the Vought Christmas special, where all the other members of the Seven are puppets.
Right.
One of them not voiced by Stan Malibu. I think he would probably critique the puppeteering in this.
Right, but I will say I would buy the screen-used Homelander puppet.
Okay.
I would. I definitely want one.
And a lot of the Christmas songs that they're singing in this are very much about, like, turn in your parents. If you see something, say something. All that sort of jazz. And Ryan maybe has, like, a little bit during rehearsal. He's like, nah, maybe I need a little bit of break from this. And the Christmas special ends out going out over the TV live. Ryan gets to have a moment, but not a full moment.
Yes.
Billy's watching. Homelander's watching. This is where Billy kind of feels like, okay, maybe Ryan's coming around. Maybe Soups can be redeemed because Ryan, of course, has powers. Homelander, of course, feels betrayed. But like I said, Ryan doesn't get to give the full breadth of what he wanted to say or could have said or whatever it is. So there's enough of a cliffhanger there. It'll be interesting to see how that needs to be spun coming out of everything, but that gets to be the last good moment that Billy has, because after that he's talking to Negan, Joe, who is, obviously whatever the manifestation is of whatever is inside of Billy. And he kind of left him hanging there during the fight when Deep and Black Noir showed up at their headquarters. And in this instance at the bar, leaves Billy passed out, blacked out, possibly on his last legs on the floor of the bar there.
Right. And just on Ryan, did you know Ryan is played by twins?
No, I did not know that.
He's played by twins. One of them does it more of the time, I guess. And the other one fills in because I think there might be something with if you're of a certain age, you know what I mean? You can only do so much screen time. But to me, that seems why it seems like to me every once in a while Ryan's voice is cracking and other times it's not. I was talking with somebody today and they said, oh, well, it only cracks when he kind of gets nervous around Homelander. And I'm kind of I feel like one of the actors is definitely going through some stuff and the other one already has gone through some stuff, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Their M count is not the same.
Exactly. But I will just say a Christmas episode with puppets for Vought, I would have been all over that, because Christmas Eve on Avenue V is a knockoff of Christmas Eve on Sesame Street, which is in my top 3 Christmas specials of all time. So I hope they do an actual Christmas on Avenue V. But
I've seen a few more extended clips pop up on Twitter and YouTube and stuff, but nothing in full.
Right. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. But last but not least, of course, is who Sage had hired to be the shooter, because her plan is they're going to assassinate the president.
Right.
So that Victoria, the vice president, can take over. She's a soup. She could push that Amendment 25 through, and that could be the beginning of Homelander rounding up all of anyone who does not agree with him in those prisons that Tech Knight and his family are and have been building for all of those years. So we get a shapeshifter, a new power in the boys' universe. I had the broad strokes of this spoiled on me online before I got a chance to watch the episode, just in regards to the way that the shapeshifter works in this. Is that it's not as simple as we see Mystique in the X-Men movies, where she just CGIs into whatever she wants whenever she wants. the shapeshifter has to have contact with whatever or whomever she's going to shapeshift into. And then she has to essentially they have to tear off the skin of the old thing that they were to reveal the new thing that they're shapeshifting into, right?
This may have been another tough scene for Todd.
So we get a bit where they go to the shapeshifter's house. They find a bunch of the files. They grab the files. Huey and Starlight bring it back to their place. They put it into a safe. And also during the course of the episode, it's revealed that Huey never got rid of Starlight's Starlight costume.
And he also goes to make a plea to the vice president to get out here. I know you're not bad. So
to Victoria, like kind of because they had that friendship in season 3, trying to make that last plea to her because he gets his hand pretty good sliced up, doesn't go to urgent care, he just wraps it up himself, and goes to visit with Victoria, and I don't think he got through to her, unfortunately.
No.
So he goes home. Annie comes in. She puts the Starlight costume on. They go to bed. Annie wakes up in the middle of the night. She goes over to the safe. And she takes the stuff out of the safe that they'd gotten out of the shapeshifter's room. And as she comes back up into frame, you see her eyes kind of turn a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting here thinking, like, literally I have it in my notes. When did the shapeshifter get Annie? Because we then cut back to the shapeshifter's home, and Annie is chained to the floor, and we see the skin, the worn out husk of the woman that came up to Annie in the bar earlier and said, "Starlight, big fan. Could I get a selfie?"
Mm-hmm.
That was the shapeshifter.
Right. Now, I will say, when the shapeshifter was going to the safe to get the plans and the computer for Victoria,
sure,
I will say that was not a hard scene to watch. But I like that scene.
Would you say, Todd, that the shapeshifter impersonating Annie was the face of this episode?
The face? Woo. Anyway, but Joe, okay, I'm going to tell everybody now. I'm going to give it a few beats after I said, I'm going in hot with the theory that if I'm right, you don't want to know it for next week.
Right.
But if I am, I'm going to take my victory lap. So I'm going to give it 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. I think this shapeshifter has been around a lot longer than we think. I think the shapeshifter is Frenchie's boyfriend. I think the shapeshifter is Kamiko's other girl that's been chasing her. And I think the shapeshifter has been Huey's mom. And we're going to get this. We're going to get this reveal next week that this shapeshifter has the power because they were keeping certain feminine products in the house and stuff. That all they need is some of you to touch and change, and they've been changing back and forth. And I think that house contains not only Starlighter, Huey's mom, and the other people. And they've been going. And since they slept with Huey, Huey's going to be the person they frame for attacking the president. Everybody would think it's Starlighter, but I think Huey's going to get the bad boy blame.
You make a really good point. Again, I don't know if there's a theory that's out there. I do my best to avoid as much as I can. I don't want anything spoiled for me on the show.
Right.
But of course, our conversation here in regards to this doesn't count toward that sort of whatever in my head. From the very beginning, you have said something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
All of these people being put into these places for each of our characters, it's not a coincidence.
Yep.
And obviously, at this point, we now have, obviously, we have a how that it's been the shapeshifter this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very good theory.
And I'll say, like I said, if that's the way it works out in the comics, like if all this is in the comics, we admit we tapped out at certain points, right?
I think we are so far removed from what's going on in the show versus what happened or happens in the comic. It's like two completely different things.
I'm just saying if there's a shapeshifter in the comic, then, I don't know it because I didn't read the comics is what I'm trying to say. That's my out. If they're like, oh, you're not smart. You just read the comics. So I never read them. But I will admit, me too. I don't go looking for fan theories and like spoiler alert. I just was watching it, and that's kind of where I went. And there's an off chance that there's somebody connected to MM, but I don't think as much. I think just him having the panic attacks is enough because maybe his daughter, acting up in school over Todd's death and everything like that, but I doubt it. But the other people make sense to me, and that's like they pickpocketed the V instead. It didn't fall out of Huey's pocket. They took it, and the mother works for Vought, so they'd know. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just too convenient at this point for me. But I didn't know what it was all those months ago. And doing the fake out with Negan showing up, like that he's a vision for Butcher, like that's the and they made it so blatant that you're like, that's the dumbest reveal. That's not the reveal. That's not going to be smart. This is going to counteract that. It's like, we gave you that so you'd be concentrating on the visions, that it's the shapeshifter. It's the bait and switch, if you get my meaning.
Yep.
But that's all I'm going to say on it. I hope I didn't ruin the episode for you, Joe.
Some would say it's one of those classic wrestling gotchas.
A wrestling gotcha, yes.
But that being said, I'm excited to watch the finale of The Boys, which is scheduled to come out this week.
Yes.
I still think it will be scheduled to come out and will come out this week. I don't think anything else will happen that could possibly delay it.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's everything, Joe.
Yes, that's what I like to hear. I like to hear that's everything, so we could put a bow on everything and say thank you for listening to episode 719 of Longbox Heroes. For Todd, this is Joe saying we'll see y'all here next week.
Remember, be a faucet, not a drain.
You're listening to the soon-to-be-named network, the Lamborghini of podcast networks.
The Rob is a Longbox hero. The Rob is a Longbox hero. He gives us five stars.